everyone, I'm Allie with the Potomac Bead Company, and I am going to be using some Czech bugle beads here today to make for you a Templar Cross. So it's kind of started here, and I tried a number of different ways. I want to show you all the different options that you have as we're creating. But in the center of the Templar Cross, we are going to be using a 10mm Rivoli. So this is a Potomac Crystal Rivoli in a 10mm. If you need any of these materials to do this Templar Cross, you can go on the left-hand side here. We'll do little drop-down menus for you. That way you can gather any of the materials from us online. Or if you go below the video, if you don't have the little pop-ups there, if you're on a mobile or such, below the video there's always a description of the video. And that description, you can press show more on that description, and that'll bring you down so that way you can get links to all the different products. Again, I'm going to be using the Czech bugle beads, and I'm using these in the bronze aluminum, so they're the aluminum silver. And you will need, per actual cross, you're going to need 12 of those bugle beads. In addition to the bugle bead, the 10mm crystal Rivoli in the center, I'm going to be using one of the Potomac Crystal Magic Blue in the center. For the 11Os that create the cross around the bugles, we are using the Duracoat Opaque Juniper, in the 11O seed beads, which is a nice blue that's going to kind of catch that blue of the magic blue. And then for the 15O silver, I'm using the Sparkle Silver Gray in a 15O, which is just there right around the center of the piece, just to kind of pull it in together. If you don't want to use any 15Os, you don't have to use them. I should have mentioned that the Czech bugles, going back to those, they're a 12mm. So if you have any Miyuki bugles that are 12mm or twisted bugles, you could use those as well in place of the Czech bugles. That's kind of up to you. So in addition to the seed beads and the crystal, you can have a chain or something to put the actual cross on. I'll show you just a simple chain later. But we're going to be needing some thread and needle. I'm using 0.006 white wildfire beading thread, and you're going to use about 6 feet. This cross, even though it's pretty small, it's about the size of a $50. The cross itself, that 30mm, is going to require about 6 feet of thread, so it's a lot of thread. To thread everything, you want a size 10 or a size 12 beading needle. I just have here the Prony brand size 10 needle. I also have handy my wildfire cord cutter, and the cord cutter I use to get the thread actually off the spool and then to burn down the edges when I finish off the piece. Also, if you want to have handy some super glue, you can glue the knots. That's up to you. I do like to work on a nice workable surface. Usually I work on my bead on it board that I can kind of carry around. Here I'm working on a nice felted bead mat, so that's an option for you as well. Also, to flatten out the end of the thread, I usually have a needle nose pliers on hand. That way I can flatten out the end to get the needle on easier once I use the cord cutter to burn off the actual thread. To get started, we are basically going to be creating this kind of captured effect for our Rivoli using our bugle beads here, and also our 11O seed beads. If you watch the videos or subscribe, I also did a pair of earrings that's kind of set on the same idea. You could wear them together, and those are the framed fire earrings. So you can watch that video if you want to get a pair of earrings to go along with this pendant. The pendant is a little bit more involved than the actual earrings, but they give you basically the same kind of exact method of creating. So to get started, we're going to start the same way that I did with the earrings, and we are going to be using our bugles and our 11O seed beads. So to get started on my 6-foot piece of thread, I have a 15O seed bead that's called a stop bead. That's just going to be about 3 inches up from the very end of my thread, and I've taken my needle through it 2 times in order to stop the beads from falling off the thread. To start the design, we're going to be starting with 4 of our bugle beads with an 11O seed bead in between each bugle. So it's just the bugle, 11, bugle, 11, bugle, 11. Since I started with an 11O, or a bugle rather, I want to end with an 11O. Let that all drop down next to that actual stop bead. With the thread and needle then, I'm going to take the needle back through the first bugle and back through the first 11L and exit. That's going to create a square. You can see the square design that the bugles create. That square we're going to enhance by adding my little corner pieces, which are going to be 3 of my 11s. Coming out of that 11L, I'm going to circle around, going back through that 11, and creating a little bit of a point. Once I have that point on there, I'm going to do the same thing again, adding 3 more 11s and circling through the 11L again. And that's going to put 2 pieces, or 2 of those little points on. So you're going to end up looking like you have 2 little leaves or so coming off from that 1 seed bead in the center. Next, go through your next bugle, as well as your 11, and do the same thing. We're going to repeat the same thing 8 times in total, 2 on each corner, adding 3 more beads, going back and around through that singular bead. 3 more beads, back and around through that first singular bead. Give a little tug on your thread. Skip over to the next bugle. So I'm going to continue doing this 4 more times, 2 more in each of these other corners. As you finish up that last corner, adding that last kind of grouping of 3, I want you to go through the next bugle and out that corner bead, so that out that corner 11L that my little trims are based off of. Then go up 2 seed beads on that first trim that you did, that first grouping of 3. Go up 2 so you're coming out the top of 1. As I do that, I'm going to grab 5 11O seed beads and circle around to the next grouping of 3 here, grabbing the centered bead. If you do want a lot more detailed process of how to create this frame to hold the crystal, again, I do have the previous video that I did, which was on the framed fire earrings. 5 more 11s go on. You're going to go to the center of that other bead grouping. So I'm just adding groups of 5 11s and connecting to the centermost bead on each of those first groupings of 3 additional beads we did. And that's going to bring the whole focus towards the center of the project. So I've got those 5 beads on and up through that center one again. This creates the centered section for me to base my Rivoli inside of. So when I go to put my Rivoli on the inside of the cross, it will actually sit right in the center here. To close it up tighter in order to get that nice and tight section so the crystal will sit in place, I'm going to sew through 1, 2, 3, and 4 out of those 5 11Os that we just added on the first go round. When I get to the corners now, I'm going to go ahead and dump out my 15s. They're going to be a little bit hard to see because they're just that sparkle silver gray. And I want to add 3 of those 15s onto my needle. Skipping over the 5th bead, the center bead, and the first bead, I'm going to sew into the next 3 11s, so beads 2, 3, and 4 in my next group of those 5 11s. Coming out, bead number 4, add 3 more 11s. So into bead 2, 3, and 4 on the next section of 5. If you don't want the look of any 15-0s, you could use 2 11s in place of this 3 15s. I just want to be able to see more of the crystal, so I'm using the 15s. After you sew through beads 2, 3, and 4, grab your 3 15s and go through the next grouping 2, 3, and 4. And what this is doing too is kind of squaring off the corners. Again, 3 more go on. And 3 beads 2, 3, and 4 of our last section of 5. That frame then that we just created is what our crystal is going to sit inside of. In order to actually kind of tighten it more and make it more secure, take your thread and needle back through that entire progression of seed beads that you did, all of the 15s, as well as those 3 11s on each side that you caught into. It's especially important because we're going to be re-catching and re-going into those 3 11s. So I'm going the whole way around, and that's going to tighten up that center section also, so you make sure that you don't lose your crystal. Once you've progressed the whole way around, we're actually going to kind of hop to the back and do the exact same thing. To hop to the back, I'm going to go through my 3 beads on one of my sides, but then also pick up that 5th bead as well as the center bead. Make sure the thread doesn't get tangled here, and do a little pull. What I need to do is create this same effect on the actual back of the project as I did on the front, so that same framing effect. To get to the back, I'm going to go through the bead along the side here, and then through that middle bead at the very top of the frame, the middle bead that we made the little picot trims on, that was in between the original bugles. And I'm going to bring my needle out towards the back of the project. Once I'm out the back there, you can kind of move that stop bead off to the side, just kind of push it out of the way. And we're going to repeat the exact same thing that we did at the start. The only difference is going to be that we're adding the 3 beads now, going through that same 11-0 in a circular form, almost, if you're familiar, like you're doing right angle weave. And then once you're through there, I'm also going to go through the next bugle in line. Coming out the bugle then, go ahead and catch on to the next 11-0. So through. Some of these Duracoat Opaques do have a little bit smaller of a hole because of the coating. So if you need to, you can switch to a size 12 if you're not on a size 12. I'll go 3 more seed beads, back through that 11, and then through the bugle. We're going to circle that the whole way around through the bugle, going back through, creating that extra little grouping of 3 that we're going to pull in to do the back of the project. As you're coming around and finishing up the last grouping of 3, right as I finish up that grouping, I'm going to go ahead and actually go to the top, or go through the next 2 beads, the first 2 that were added in that round. That's going to bring me out right along the corner in order for me to pull back down all the corner beads, adding my group of 5 beads between. So there's my group of 5. I grab that little bead on the corner there, and pull in the group of 5. As I do this, it's literally just a continuation of what was done on the front. The exact same thing now that you have your groups of 3 in there. You're going to connect to and add those beads 5 at a time. Add those around, pull in, and then just get your last group of 5 added on the end. I've gone ahead now and finished up my groups of 5. And then what I'm starting to do is add in my seed beads. So I'm going to add in those 15 O's, groupings of 3, skipping over bead number 5 and bead number 1 of the next grouping of 5, going to beads 2, 3, and 4. I'll get 2 of those groupings of 3 in, and then we'll pop our crystal in place. 2 of those groups of 3. We'll pop the crystal in place. Now that I have those 2 groups of 3, put in the crystal, give a nice little tight yank, and the crystal is going to be set right in the middle there. On goes 3 more, and on to the next grouping of 3. Pull nice and tight, and that'll pull those beads kind of in towards the center more. So last grouping of 3 is on. Go back through the original 3 beads here. And just like we did around the front then, I like to go around the whole thing and kind of tighten it up, making sure then that the crystal is actually going to stay nice and in place. So you'll go ahead and circle around completely, going through all of those 11 O's and all of the 15 O's on these little bridge areas, giving a nice tight yank to pull that all in closer together. As we finish up the back then, the front is finished and the back is finished. And now what we're going to do is embellish and form that cross. So if you did want to stop here, this is basically the whole framed fire earring. So it's the exact same technique. To add and embellish and create that Templar cross, you can see this one went through a bunch of different kind of variations on how long the cross was actually supposed to be. The same thing happened to 2 other examples as well, right in front of it. So I figured out the count that I really like, which is adding some additional bugles on the sides. Like I said, we're going to add up and build up the bugles so that there's 3 in each set, using 12 altogether. Going through those last 3 beads here, I'm going to go through my next grouping of 3 seed beads along the edge, making sure that you're exiting along 3 seed beads. Going up then to the corner, go through the 5th seed bead in that row, as well as the corner seed bead. Getting up to the top then, I'm going to go through one of the side beads on that little picot trim, as well as through that center bead one more time. Once I'm through that center bead one more time, I'm then going to go through my bugle. And the bugles have nice big holes. The Czech ones are pretty thick. They have nice big holes, so you'll be able to get lots of threads through them. At this point here, I'm going to use a ladder stitch, kind of a version of a ladder stitch, to add extra bugles onto here. So I have my thread coming out of one of my bugles, and I'm adding another bugle. Just like we did to create the loop effect, I'm going to go back through that bugle with the thread coming out towards the thread end. So I'm circling around, which is going to lay the one bugle right on top of the other one. In a ladder stitch, we're going to go back through the bugle that we just added with the thread now coming towards me. You'll see 2 thread bridges going on one side and 1 thread bridge on the other. We're going to add our 3rd bugle in the same fashion, going through, adding the bugle, sewing back into the last bugle that was here, back through the bugle that we just added, and the thread is going to end towards the top of the screen. Give a nice tight pull so you don't see a lot of extra thread showing. What I want to do now is actually bend this over so it's more in a triangle shape. To bend it over to that triangle shape, the threads coming out the top of the third bugle, I'm going to go in to the very first bugle with a thread on the same side of the bugle. So you can see it's kind of looping over. What that's going to do is pull that bugle down along the side. So back through bugle number 3 up towards the top. That's going to get those bugles to sit nice and tightly next to one another in that triangular shape. Next, go ahead and add 2 11/0s and scoot over. Oh, I'm sorry, getting ahead of myself. Next, what you want to do is go back into that bottom baseline bugle and through that bugle. Once I'm in that bugle and I have that grouping of 3 on, go back through the center bugle between the 2 rows. And so back through that center, or the center 11/0 rather than the bugle, sorry. We're going back through that 11/0, right there on the corner. Pull your tail through if it's getting longer or shorter there. And we're going to add in more bugles in the same fashion. So I'll show you one more time how I added in that bugles, creating that triangle bugle. So I'm through my 11/0 on the corner, through the bugle. We're going to ladder stitch and add the bugle. So I'm kind of holding it towards the back because that triangle is going to sit towards the back. Add another one of my bugle beads. So back through that original bugle that my thread's coming out of, and get that second bugle to lay right on top of the first. Go back through the second bugle so my thread is coming out the top of the screen. Adding one more bugle, so back from the bottom to the top of the second bugle, make the third lay down and bring the thread back down to the bottom of that third bugle. So you have 3 stacking one on top of another. To connect it to the base bugle, so through the bottom bugle on the same side the thread's coming out of. And that's going to fold the bugle right on top of itself. As the thread's coming out the top of bugle number 1, go into the top of bugle number 3 and back down. And that's going to catch them all together. Hop over to the next set by going through the next 11/0 in the corner and through the next bugle, making sure you're not going through your stop bead if you're on the corner with your stop bead. And we're going to get ready to add our next grouping of 3. So coming out the bugle again, we're going to do the same thing. And you can see how I was saying they kind of sit towards the back of the project. This is the front of the project. You'll see 2 bugles. And in the back, you'll see bugles number 1 and 3. Go ahead now that you're at the next corner and add 2 more bugles, and then we'll skip over and add 2 more at the top. As you're coming out the back of the last bugle then, and you have your groups of 3, go ahead and put 2 11/0 seed beads on. You should be coming out the third bugle bead. And I'm going to go into the third or the backmost bugle after I put on 2 11s. Put on 2 more 11s and scoot over to the third or the backmost bugle, because you can see I'm at the back of that Rivoli. And I'm just basically connecting that back bugle by adding 2 seed beads along the back. What that's going to do is keep those bugles to the back and just pull them back a tiny bit so that the front stays the focus. As you add those last 2, take your stop bead there and just kind of make sure that you can still access it and still get it out of your project. So I'm just kind of removing that thread there and getting that out. So now you have your back done with those 2 seed beads kind of going around the back, and you can see kind of that mix there. You can see that there's still a gap at the top bugle bead because the 3 that are at the top are really towards the front. So we'll go ahead and we'll add in then the 3 along the top. To do so, I'm coming out of one of my back bugles because I just finished my group of 2 between each bugle. I'm going to slide my needle and thread through the top bugle, which would be the second bugle that you added. And as I go around the circle this time, rather than adding 2, I'm going to add 4 of my 11-0 seed beads. So pick up 4 11-0s with your needle and catch on to the top bugle in each row, adding those 4 seed beads in between each. What that's going to do is hide all the thread there, so you'll have 2 in the back, 4 in the middle, and then your 3 doing your little picot trim right towards the top. Continue along the edge, adding in those 4 additional seed beads right along the top bugle. So after you spin around adding those 4 beads on the corners, we're basically left with our little box, which we're going to create our little cross design. If you wanted to stop here and you don't want to continue on to the Templar Cross, you could actually stop at this point and stop with the very simplistic version of the Templar Cross. You could also make these into earrings if you want them to match more so and look like they have a little bit more stability than the actual framed fire. When you're coming out the top bugle, here's where we're going to start doing more of that ladder stitching. So we did the ladder stitching along the bugles where we added one and then kind of circled around and back through that one and added the other. We're going to do the exact same thing above the bugles, except we're going to do it with our 11-0 seed beads. So you can see here that the 11-0 seed beads are going to start as 7, 6, 5, 4. And we're going to start creating kind of that triangle. That triangle then gets folded over the front and is going to connect into those 3 beads sitting right along the crystal. So coming out here along the edge, you're going to start with your 7 beads here, and then we're going to go again down to 7, 6, 5, and 4. So to start your 7, you're going to use your 11-0 seed beads and put 7 on your needle. Those 7 seed beads then, you're going to go back through the topmost bugle, the bugle that we just went around and put 4 seed beads between, and come out the top. Those 7 seed beads then are going to sit right on top of that bugle. Go back through those 7 seed beads that you just added, circling the thread around. Coming out the top of that, go ahead now and reduce your count, so you're adding 6 seed beads. Take your needle and thread, sew back through the 7 that are already there, circling your thread. That'll lay the 6 right on top of the 7, and sew back through the 6 that you just added. You're repeating this ladder stitch then, going down from the 7, 6 to 5 and stopping at 4. Once you have your triangle going from the 7, 6, 5 to 4, you're going to go back through, so you're coming out the row of 4. So I'm finishing up that row. And just like I would be getting ready to add a row of 3, that's where I'm going to actually be connecting to the 3 seed beads right at the Rivoli, bending this down to the top. To connect to those 3 beads, the thread is coming out towards the bottom of the screen here. I'm going to go into those 3 seed beads towards the middle there, catching those 3 middle ones, going from the top towards the bottom. From there then, give a little pull, and that's going to bend those grouping of beads right along the top. Going back through then, just like if we were going back through the grouping of 4, that's going to get that completely centered and stuck together. I'm then going to go back through that grouping of 3, finishing up that complete ladder stitch. And I have some thread ends because I always start off with less thread, so I'll eventually kind of tuck those underneath and burn those down. That's going to get the first piece of our cross completed. Switching over now to the sides, we're going to kind of go up the side of the piece along that baseline of 5, going through what would actually be a right angle unit, that circular unit of 3. And I'm going to get back, basically working my thread back towards one of the top bugles. And the key with this is just making sure that all of your thread is hidden. So you want to make sure again that you're coming out the top bugle, which is going to be the bugle that has the beading group of 4 going around it. Pour out a couple more of my beads here. Go ahead and start with 7. Go back through that top bugle, back through the grouping of 7, working my way down now to 6, back through those 6. You can see I usually like to pinch the beads when I'm doing ladder stitch. What that does is allows me to make sure the beads are right on top of one another and not a lot of extra thread is showing. Down to 5. Circling the thread around and back into the 5. Pinching that in place, going from 5 to 4, circling around, holding that 4 in place and kind of pinching it with your thread and needle coming out that grouping of 4. I'm going to fold it right on top, going back through those center 3 11-0 seed beads that my 15-0s were kind of catching around. That folds the seed beads right along the cross. And I'm going to go from the grouping of 3 that we just went through, back to the grouping of 4. And that's going to kind of lock everything in place. Once I have that locked in place, go back through your grouping of 3. Give a nice little tight yank to get rid of any extra thread because we don't want to see a ton of extra thread. Go up through bead number 5 there, and your corner beads, and snake your needle back through the side beads here so you can get back to the top of your bugle bead without seeing any thread. Then when we come out of the top of the bugle bead, we just continue. So it's just the same exact thing, adding in again my group of 7, 6, 5, 4, and connecting with that center 3rd bead. So you can see I have 2 sides of my cross finished, and I need to do my upper and my left side. As I come to the last section here, I'm actually finished up with my Templar Cross. So all I'm going to do now is actually kind of get rid of the thread. And I'm going to get rid of the thread by also getting rid of the thread end here, because I have the opportunity to end near that same corner. Just like I've been doing, I'm going to snake my needle and thread up through the top, so that way I don't see any extra thread kind of hanging out, and get it right towards the back of the project. If you need to, you can see sometimes you have to kind of sew through the project just to get your needle to go where it wants to go. And sewing back through, then all I'm going to do is take my thread ends and actually end them in the same place. For your thread ends then, you're just going to go ahead and tie off those 2 ends after taking off the stop bead. Once you have these 2 ends tied, you can then glue them if you want, or just burn them down with your thread burner. That's kind of up to you. And I'll show you how I'm going to make the actual necklace, like I said, and kind of making a chain. If you want to make the chain, you're more than welcome to. You can actually put it on a real chain. That's kind of up to you. If you would do it in the silver and gold colors, it's going to actually look like an actual kind of bezel set piece. I'm going to go ahead and burn my thread ends down. And starting with a whole new piece of thread then, I'm going to get ready to do my little simple chain. The simple chain, because I have tons of the extra bugles, I'm going to use those extra bugles in order to create my chain. To create the chain then, I have, you can use some beading wire, you can use some thread and needle, that's up to you. If you're using thread and needle, I would suggest using 2 pieces of thread through the actual beaded part. All I'm going to do is take the remaining bugles and my 15-0s and just create a chain for it. The cool thing about this project is when you actually create the chain, and I'll just show you, and then if you need to learn, if you do want to use beading wire, which I would suggest, you can look at some of the other videos on how to use beading wire and crimping the ends. And the chain is just literally going to be the bugles with a little 15-0 in between, because you have plenty of those left over. Once you get to the center of your necklace, you're actually going to be able to lift up that little space just enough to get another one of your bugles underneath. I'm going to have the chain go right down to the bugle. So the bugle is going to kind of go right underneath. And I'll finish up the chain just adding in the bugles with the 15-0 seed beads. Once you're finished with the chain, you can see all I did was crimp beads at the end. And again, just a bugle with a little 15-0 in between. You have your pendant finish here of that fun look going along with the Templar Cross. With the example piece too, you can kind of see the difference of doing it in colored seed beads versus actually metal colors. I like the look of the metal colors a lot because it looks more like a cross, whereas the blue, it kind of looks more like a design. So it's up to you what colors you would like to do it. I think I'm actually going to make one for myself just to give an idea that has some silver seed beads in the back along with gold seed beads making the cross. So doing 2 different colors of the 11-0s. And then for the bars, using some of this either coppery, kind of crystal gray tone, or actually an actual copper piece. It's really fun to make these and to kind of see what differences you can get. It's a really easy step-by-step pattern to do the Templar Cross and to make it look fun. It's also somewhat of a reversible pendant. So again, different points in the project, I did say you could stop here. You can make it look like this. This has a very Art Deco look versus the cross on the front. So you can see the difference kind of the looks when you're going in and actually starting the project. As always, if you need any of the materials to do the Templar Cross, you can go back to the beginning of the video to the little drop-down menu. If you don't have the drop-down menu up here, underneath the video, there's the description. The description always has the details of what the video is about, and then that little Show More button. Click on that Show More, and it'll give you links that you can subscribe, or you can get onto those links and click to find all the different materials that you may need to do the project. As always, if you want to stay connected with us more, you can visit us at PotomacBeads.com. You can also check us out on Facebook and on Instagram. And you can follow us on Facebook if you want to become part of an interactive group on our closed group for beading and jewelry making. Ask to become a member there, invite your friends, and get a really great way to interact with other beaders and other jewelry artists. They answer questions. They're super helpful, naming things for me a lot, as well as solving problems and issues and really kind of being a springboard for design ideas. You can also subscribe to this YouTube channel, which will get you an email when we do new videos, so that way you can click and like and subscribe and all that good stuff to stay connected with us even more. We love to hear from you guys, what you guys are creating. Show us what you're doing, answering your questions and all of that as well. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and have fun creating the Templar Cross.